enough room for some introductions on the participants' end, so we would love to hear who's in the room. So it's just to start from the back, coming forward and over to this way, please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Iris. I'm a part of the Charlie Television Service of Personal Assistance to Deputy Minister. Welcome.
Gavin, I work for the Attracting Partnership. Super excited to hear this amazing panel today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Aina Folk. I work with GIZ in Uganda. I work on procurement also starting some initiatives on women-led businesses and procurement.
Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alison Merchant. I work for the OGP Support Unit, and I'm our gender advisor.
Welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm Esther Filipini and I work with a donor collaborative called Transparency Accountability Initiative. And our job is to coordinate, influence members and other funders. And we are, of course, as our name says, we work a lot around accountability issues and fighting corruption, so procurement is up on the agenda, and gender inclusion and social inclusion in general is also a high topic for our members.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We have a really good topic, as you've all mentioned, and we're just looking at how procurement can support gender equality. So I have a great panel with me to have this conversation. My name is Steph Moshai. I am on the OGP Global Steering Committee, but my day job is with the International Lawyers Project, and really pleased to be here. So I will start on my left with Mr. Mokelani Dimba. He's an executive in the Education and Communication Department at the South African Information Regulator. Welcome, Mokelani. Thank you for joining us. And then I have with me Mr. Benson on my end, who is with the Uganda Public Procurement Authority. Thank you for joining us. On my right, Mr. Gilbert Sendugwa, our host today, the Executive Director of the Africa Freedom of Information Center, and one of the co-conveners of the panel. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Mylene Bordelou, Program Officer in the Democratic and Inclusive Governance Program at the IDRC. Thank you for joining us today. And then lastly, but certainly not least, from the Open Government Partnership, we have Lindsay, who is the Director of Data and Engagement. So thank you all for coming to have this conversation with us. Like we have said, the topic is looking at how procurement can promote gender equality. Public procurement markets are the largest markets basically in the world, and a great opportunity to leverage and promote gender equality. About 60% of national budgets every year are through public procurement, yet women-owned businesses take less than 1% of this value due to legal and policy barriers, operational and capacity barriers, and also social and cultural challenges. So we're going to explore how government partnership platform can be used to address this gender equality in public procurement around the world. And this panel is based on a recent International Development Research Center funded research implemented by the Africa Freedom of Information Center, the Open Contracting Partnership, and the Institute for Social Accountability. And so I'm just going to invite the panelists to just give us some opening remarks to help us set the tone and the stage for the conversation. And I'll start with Gilbert. I would really just like to hear what are your opening statements on the research, on the key findings with regards to gender equality in procurement. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and also the audience online. As the moderator has stated, public procurement can be a major policy instrument that lifts everyone, because over 60% of the national budgets in the study countries that we looked at is spent through public procurement every year. However, women-owned businesses take less than 1%, which then becomes a big problem to achieve SDG goals on gender equality. So we set out to examine the reasons why this is a challenge. We found so many reasons, and then we clustered them into three baskets. The first one being legal and policy barriers, operational and capacity barriers, and then economic barriers, social cultural barriers. In terms of legal and policy barriers, public procurement is requires stiff requirements for someone to be able to be eligible to participate. And these are too steep, especially for women, both in urban and rural areas, to get these minimums. Secondly, the legal requirements for being sexually trained was also a major challenge because most women don't have assets, they don't have their own money to prove that they really have, what it takes to undertake and participate in public procurement. The other issue is that the requirements around proving that you have the technical and financial. The law imposes a lot of requirements that you must prove that you have the necessary technical and the financial requirements before you can be trusted to participate in public procurement. And even in countries like Tanzania, where the law was amended to provide for affirmative action, we found lack of implementation because of another legal challenge which required that for them to participate as bidders through the affirmative action, they must first form groups. Now, partnerships are based on trust. So to say that the law requires you to relate in order to participate in public procurement was another big legal challenge. When it comes to operational capacity challenges, public procurement is technical. It requires for bidders to prepare responsive bids. The ability of women businesses to access information, first and foremost, which was a separate challenge, but also interpret and prepare responsive bids was a big challenge, even where there were possibilities to participate in small contracts by government. Access to information was another big challenge, where tender opportunities are published in newspapers, online, on websites. Most of the businesses could not access this information, but also on the language that is used to publish these tender opportunities presented another challenge. And then, of course, there was another big problem of late payments, where, for example, in Kenya, which has a big program called Access to Government Procurement Opportunities, that reserves contracts for women, youth, and persons with disabilities, we found many instances of women who supplied 7 years ago and up to now are still waiting. And as a result, unfortunately, most people in Kenya will know, some people committed suicide, some women were depressed, their businesses were taken and collapsed. So this was a big challenge. And in fact, the confidence in this program has gone down from 99,000 women leaders who registered and participated in public procurement as of 2019, now to 43,000. So these challenges are undermining the confidence and the ability of women to participate in government procurement opportunities. And then, of course, also around the social cultural barriers, sexualization of contracts, corruption, among other challenges, affected these women. Now, as a result of all this, the few who are participating in public procurement, there is an urban-rural bias. Most of the women who are participating are based in large counties and cities. In Uganda, for example, the study finds that 70% of the few women businesses that are participating in public procurement are based in either Kampala or Wakiso. Uganda has 146 districts, so you can imagine. So there's also a geographical dimension or impact of this problem. The other one is that the few who are participating in low-value contracts. Now, the implication of this is that women businesses cannot grow. They keep rotating, at the small scale level. They don't graduate to medium and large scale contracts, which then keeps it a problem for them to participate. And then also, we found a big challenge across the board of lack of implementation or poor implementation of affirmative policies. I've already talked about the example in Kenya, where awareness about alcohol is lacking, delayed payments is a major issue, but also in Tanzania, Kenya is a bit better, but in Tanzania, the law was amended in 2016 to provide for affirmative action, but then there's no one who has actually benefited by way of winning a contract under this affirmative action because, procuring entities are not intentional in promoting this, reserving contracts for them. And then also the implementation is a big challenge. And then also across the board, the lack of gender segregated data in public procurement. All of us know that what cannot be measured cannot be improved. If, for example, data was properly captured and segregated, it would be possible for a regulator to say, how come in this rural district we don't see women? How come in Kenya the rural counties are not participating, women are not participating in contracts in rural areas? Or, as it is in Kenya, how come that the issue of late payments is more pronounced with counties and not with central government agencies? So all these would be important to have a discussion that would implement and improve policy implementation. On the issue of late payments also.
I'll give you one moment.
Yes, on the issue of late payments, this issue, for example, in Kenya has been engaged quite often, and resources have a number of times been allocated to pay suppliers. It is done at national level, but then at county level, nobody knows where this money goes. So without understanding who gets paid and who doesn't get paid, or those who are supplying late are the ones who are paid first, this data will help to have this conversation and improve the intended objectives of the policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gilbert, for that kind of outline of the research findings. I hope that's useful to set the stage. Now I want to zoom out a little bit with my name, and we want to look at the ecosystem around gender equality and how that's supported. So for you, I'd very much like to hear about the role of development organizations in promoting gender equality, and maybe we can hear a bit about IDRC's Women Economic Empowerment Programs, just to help us understand how that works.
Of course. Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today alongside such an experienced panel. So my name is Milan Tordolo, and I work with Canada's International Development Research Center. We're a crown corporation that has been supporting research for and alongside the Global South for over 50 years. So what we do is we provide the local relevant evidence, and we promote the use for greater update and impact. And we do so with working with partners from across the world. As part of our corporate strategy 2030, we recognize that inequalities, whether they're based on gender, on race, on identity, prevent marginalized groups with a focus on women to access services, opportunities, and escape poverty, which is why then all the work that we do, gender and inclusion is central. And one of our flagship programs on women's economic empowerment is titled GROW, in short for Growth and Economic Opportunities for Women in East Africa. And one of the thematic objectives is indeed to deepen our understanding of public procurement as an effective tool to empower women and reduce the economic gap. So what we're doing more concretely is that we've supported 3 action-oriented research projects to better understand the barriers, as Gilbert pointed out, and propose, test out solutions that could be suitable in the different local contexts. We've also supported the open contracting partnerships for the last few years to document successes, lessons learned on public procurement reforms, and document the outcomes in terms of gender inclusion, climate sustainability, and integrity. I won't talk more about this because, of course, Lindsay is a better place to do so. But I wanted to echo on the findings from an evidence review that we commissioned that indeed confirms that there's a wide set of barriers. As mentioned, these are structural, legal, cultural, and financial, and these needs to be tackled for women to fully participate in those public procurement opportunities. About perhaps the second part of the question about what can donors such as IAC do in the future to maximize the gain. Well, of course, first, as a research organization, we believe in the power of data, indeed, until we know and maybe have a clear picture of the hurdles and what are their magnitudes, it's going to be difficult to come up with adequate solutions. But I also think that donors can use their convening powers to help local partners create those relationships and partnerships with local government, ministries, agencies, and that we should do more work to perhaps put together our pools of funding, ensure that we align on our practices and efforts to prevent from duplication of effort and maximize the gains.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those well-articulated opportunities and everything that IPRC is doing in this area. So you both touched on data, on research, and the importance of that. Lindsay, data. There's an expression I think that I suspect came out of the US. In God we trust, everyone else must bring data. So we want to know, why is data so important and engagement with data in supporting women's participation in public procurement?
Well, thank you, Stephanie. I mean, you said it, data. What more? No. And basically building on what Gilbert and Milan have shared, you can't manage what you can't measure. And if we want to make improvements, in any open government area of responsibility, but let's say specifically about procurement because it's the area we're talking about today, then really having an idea of what is the problem that we're trying to solve and how do we understand that problem? We understand it through data. So I work with the Open Contracting Partnership, and we work with reform teams around the world in more than 40 countries to improve their public procurement systems. And we leverage technology, we leverage collaboration, and really go through an intentional theory of change design with these partners to think about, what is the change we're trying to achieve? How are we going to measure this change? Because monitoring evaluation is very important. How are we going to make the decisions about what types of interventions that we're going to do to affect this change? And how are we going to track the results and iterate? And to do any of this, data is really the foundation. So when it comes to participation of women-led businesses, really around the world, not enough governments are working to disaggregate the data to identify the different types of companies that are participating and entrepreneurs who are participating as registered potential suppliers, how many are bidding, how many are winning contracts, what are their values. So we support a data standard called the Open Contracting Data Standard, and we support governments to structure their procurement data using this tool. And as part of this, they can disaggregate and identify what types of organizations they're working with, and that might be women-led businesses, small businesses, and other types of groups or characterization of companies as well. And when it comes to women-led businesses, the first step is really to define what is a women-led business. And once there's that shared definition of what is a women-led business, then how are we going to identify that within our databases, within our systems, and how are we going to publish and share this disaggregated data so that we can know, especially for someone who's in a decision-making position, such as Director Benson over here, if he wants to know, hey, how many contracts did we award to women-led businesses last month? What were their value? What was in what sectors? What types of contracts? how are we, this is the type of thing that we have to report to our parliament, report to our president, that people are interested, and that people are interested because it affects local economic development, it affects the quality of public services as well, because we can't forget, public procurement is not just between, government and the private sector, it benefits the public. And so these women-led businesses are not only getting an opportunity to get value and grow their business through these contracts, but they're having an opportunity to give back and provide public services and goods for their communities. And so that is why data is really important.
Thank you. So now you know why, data. You cannot have a good initiative and not have a means to measure and implement it in a way that's meaningful and responsive to the challenges and the needs on the ground. So thank you very much for that. So now I'm going to turn to Mr. Vincent Turamye, just to hear basically your reflections on women's participation in public procurement, and we would love to hear some of the experiences from Uganda as well. So welcome.
Thank you very much. And I've listened and I'm appreciating the result findings. And since I'm talking on behalf of government, I think I'm the only representative of government on this stage. Let me first give some background about Uganda public procurement environment. The public procurement all over is a competitive, it requires competitive processes. And competition is a default method of public procurement. And rightly said, a very small percentage through that competitive processes goes to women and the research for. But again in Uganda, I work with a regulator that oversees that those the rules, procedures are provided for. And the procurement is decentralized. Ministries, agencies, and local authorities conduct procurements themselves. So the process is done at that level. And the role of the regulator is to ensure that the processes, the procedures are followed. Like someone said yesterday, that those who are smart will follow the procedures. Are very good at preparing these winning proposals. But whether the results are effective is another question. Because you want to essentially see that the procurement has delivered socio-economic development of the citizens. So if I win a contract through a competitive process, and then finally, you are not going to see the benefits accruing to society, then that procurement is in vain. So as government, and actually as a result of some of the findings of the research, there are some interventions that we have come up with. But maybe also to assure the audience that the Uganda government, there is good political will in terms of supporting women. And that I can attest that even our parliamentarians, there is affirmative action in terms of parliamentarians attached to the parliamentarians should be women. And that is achieved through every district, like you mentioned, 146 districts, every district has a woman representative. But they can as well compete with men for other constituencies. So there are more than 146. 146 is the best. But where they compete with men and women, then that is an issue. But also to mention that our vice president is a woman, our prime minister is a woman, our speaker of parliament is a woman. That is good and positive political will. So when we come to public procurement now, and I want to say when you are doing research, it should be intentional. It should be intentional to achieve some policy reforms. And this requires that your stakeholders, your focus group, are those that are going to provide that transformation. And I think that's what provide but focus the authority. Because we are government agents in public procurement, which is supposed to guide government on policy reforms, including legal reforms. And in 2021, we provided, we are amending the PPDA Act, the Procurement Act, and the provision on affirmative action provided for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Provisions were put in the amended act, which was signed by the President in June 2021. And those general provisions are being operationalized. We are coming up with regulations and guidelines that the guidelines are not yet out, but they are almost out because we are in the final stages of consultations. We have consulted different stakeholders, women councils, women parliamentarians, Ministry of Gender, and Ministry of Finance, which is my parliament ministry. They are stage now because of its political interest and political dissemination, because we want the politicians to buy in it and then disseminate and help us in terms of enforcing those guidelines. We are going to consult actually I showed them to me this Wednesday, but I couldn't because I was here. And 2 more minutes. But essentially, what are we talking about? We are trying to define who is a woman in the first place. Are you going to have men camouflaging in women races, with women enterprises, women companies, women farms? I mean, farms or women flaunting their husbands. And you think the woman must be guilty, but it's a man actually must be innocent. But we are also talking about enabling simplified requirements. For example, you talked about bid security. Yes, it is very difficult to get bid security because they don't have apt financial muscle. But now we are saying, let us for bid securing declaration. Bid securing declaration, just a document you sign that I'm going to jump out of this bidding process. Just signing it. If we jump out, then the authority can actually penalize. Things of experience. But more important, we are saying in the country, why we need political buy-in. The budget, the 60% we talked about, 15% of that. 15% of the budget must be deliberately spent on contracts that are awarded to women. But we are also saying 30 million in Uganda shillings, contracts, low value contracts. Let's start with those also, which is about $10,000. If you are building a small classroom block, it is even to a woman farm. And I think our role now is to ensure that we register women enterprises, we follow implementation, we enforce compliance, but also, rightly said, disaggregate data according to gender. So that we know on my government procurement portal, when these agencies are reporting, I should be able to say these contracts were awarded to women, these contracts were awarded to youth, these contracts were awarded to men. And I think that will help in terms of community growth.
Thank you for those insights on the broader women's empowerment efforts that are happening in Uganda just to secure political will for these efforts. I think some of what you said linked with what Lindsay talked about, definitions. What is a women's led business, just to ensure that the initiative is reaching the right people. And I think you made a statement that if procurement is not helping the citizens, then it is a waste. That's a really good understanding to have about the purpose of procurement. So we're going to take a 4-hour flight trip down to South Africa. And yeah.
26 hours.
From Uganda. And head over to Mukalani. So Mukalani, you have been a passionate advocate of access to information on the continent and elsewhere, and you now find yourself with the information regulator. So we would just love to hear from that perspective of an information regulator. How can information regulators support access to information for women on public procurement and kind of help ease some of those challenges?
Okay, so thank you so much, sir. Before I begin, I need to indicate that I used to be a member of the Open Contracting Partnership Board of Directors. So when the moderator introduced Lindsay as coming from OGP, I said straight. I said straight, and I said the moderator is trying to poach Lindsay from OCP. And
Always
OGP. I know you are in the steering committee, my directors.
This is how we make friends.
But I still have fiduciary responsibilities.
Happens all the time.
No, thank you. And I think it's appropriate that I'm the last person to talk because I have the least to say about this issue. That serves me right for crossing the floor from civil society to an information regulator or information commission. Because if I was speaking from the perspective of civil society, I would have a lot to say. Unfortunately, the sector that I come from, being the information commissions globally, we haven't done a lot of work in this area. We are really at the early stages of zooming in on what our responsibilities are as oversight authorities on access to information laws throughout the country. What are our responsibilities and obligations in terms of gender issues and women empowerment? So we're really at the early stages. We started off by setting up quite recently, I think it's not even 18 months yet, we set up the working group on access to information and gender and vulnerable groups. One of the earliest tasks that have been performed by the working group really is to scan the landscape, to try and figure out what are the issues that relate to women empowerment from the perspective of an information commission. What are the issues that we need to grapple with? What role can we play as information commissions to assist or to contribute towards the women empowerment and gender equality movement globally? So a study has been initiated. I cannot speak in detail on the findings from the study because it's still ongoing, but there are some early results that we are picking up. And I'd like to share those with this group because I think some of them can be relevant to what we're discussing here today. So one of the questions that we're asked in the study, we asked 81 members of the International Conference of Information Commissioners, the ICIC. We have 81 members that are taking part in that network. So we asked the members of the network, the first question was, how does your jurisdiction define vulnerable or people living in vulnerable situations. And some of the answers we got very interesting, but also quite not surprising. So, for example, people living with disabilities. About 80% of the Information Commission said these are people that are included in this definition of people in vulnerable situations. We had children as the second biggest category, and it goes all the way down. But what struck me is that women come in at number 10. So of all these jurisdictions, only 54% of those jurisdictions include women within the framework of people living in vulnerable situations. Okay, there are different nuances in different countries. We can't expect each country to look at this issue from a similar perspective. Then we zoomed in on those that said we are including women in this grouping. And then we said, of the women, which groups within the main category of women, which groups are at most urgent need to have their right of access to information guaranteed and to be supported in exercising their right of access to information. And it was interesting that 74% of the information commissions identified women living in poverty as a subgroup that needs urgent assistance in exercising their right of access to information. And I say it's interesting because we do know that when we're dealing with the issues around poverty, one of the best ways of addressing the issue, well, there are two significant ones. The first one is provision of reproductive health care services to women. And the second one is providing economic opportunities to women. Those are the surefire ways of dealing with poverty. So it was interesting that our information commissioners were identifying women living in poverty as a priority group for their work. And then we're looking at what are the challenges that this group is facing in exercising their right of access to information. I think there are two key ones. The first one is lack of legal knowledge on how to use the right. But also the second one is problems around accessibility. How to access government structures where decisions are made, how to access information around procurement, around economic opportunities. So those are the two main ones. But the difficulty that we have as information commissions is that we do not collect enough data around how women use the right of access to information. So if you were to come and ask me, as somebody coming from an information commission, to say, in South Africa, how are women using the right of access to information in the constitution or the law that promotes, that gives effect to the right? I wouldn't be able to tell you because we simply don't collect that data as information commissions. 61% of information commissions said they don't know because they don't collect this data. So there is a challenge there that we need to address as information commissions, to begin to collect this information so that we better understand how we can service this critical stakeholder grouping. And then lastly, what I want to say, in addition to collecting the data on how the laws are being used, the laws on access to information, a lot of us have to do a lot of work in promoting proactive disclosure of information. If you look at the African model law on access to information, you look at the Inter-American model law on access to information, the Kenyan access to information law, all of these instruments, both at regional levels and some of them at domestic levels, they provide for proactive disclosure of contracting information. So we need to promote that as information commissions, that governments, countries need to proactively make this information available. But also we need to encourage them to not only look at contracting information, because if you look at how these provisions are crafted, they're looking at contracting information after contracting has been done. So it says, let's issue the information after it has been done. But I think where we need to create impact is making information available right at commencement of procurement projects so that women are able to identify opportunities for economic participation, but also to ensure that whatever contracting that happens is designed right at the beginning with consent of women in mind. So those are some of the issues that perhaps as information commissions we can step in and support the agenda.
Thank you so much. You said you had a little to say, but you had a lot to say. So we very much appreciate those insights. I think I hear almost already two way forwards for two-way forwards. Is that English? Way forward in two areas. And one is that this is a community effort, and we need advocates for awareness of information and data to come alongside these efforts to raise awareness for women that the data and the information exists, first of all, and that it's there to be accessed. The second opportunity that I see for the partners is maybe just a follow-on for the research is to see how are women accessing the data and the information, and then what are they doing with it, I think would be a good complement and next step to be able to, because once we know the challenges now, but who are those using it, how are they using it, is it useful, is it not, what data can be added, what is missing, and how is this, what kind of results is it producing? So food for thought, it's not a methodology, but just an idea, putting it out there. And so we just had those initial opening remarks and thoughts to be able to set the scene. And I hope this is getting you thinking. Our online guests, please feel free to pop your questions in the live chat. They will be channeled to the panelists to share. And yourselves, please write down questions and comments as we go along. We just want to now take a second round from the panelists and go a little bit deeper and have a conversation on various elements that are coming up. So we've talked about public procurement being a pathway to the realization of the SDGs. So Marlene, I think coming from you in terms of giving us that broader perspective and insight, how is it that public procurement can support the realization of SDGs for gender equality?
Thank you. So I've mentioned the evidence review that the GROW program supported, and it has laid out a series of actually key recommendations to enhance the women's participation in public procurement. And these include simplifying procurement processes, legislating anti-discrimination laws, removing financial guarantee requirements, providing ethical trainings for public officials, and many more. Actually, another recommendation that's been coming up from newer work highlights the need to provide capacity strengthening for women to access the e-government platforms. As we've talked quite a bit actually in the last few days of digital governance, it's necessary to equip those women to actually access those digital systems. But at another level, actually, we believe in the importance of course, strengthening women's participation in public procurement, but thinking as well about gender-responsive public procurement. So seeing men there as allies too. So not only supporting women-led businesses, but any enterprises that have equal desire to shape outcomes. As unfortunately, it's not necessarily the case that all women-led enterprises may offer fair, decent working conditions for its staff, or that may offer as well opportunities for women to grow in the hierarchy. So using both, of course, will be key, including gender-responsive procurement as a transformative lever to increase the decent outcomes that will benefit gender equality. So what we can do perhaps moving next is, of course, as a research organization, I'll mention again the importance of collecting more data on women's enterprises, gender-responsive enterprises. And this is where organizations like OCP, again, that collect and publish sex-specific procurement data globally is key to move the needle. Another element that I think we need to do more is tell about the business case of gender-responsive procurement, because by now, hopefully, the human rights argument is well understood, especially from the buyers and contracting authorities. So enterprises will need to understand that they may be gaining benefit from offering services and goods that are in compliance with international norms and standards. And third, collaboration. So we're here at the OGP Summit because, again, we believe in the value of civil society as a key partner in testing out some solutions, capacity strengthening. We have quite a lot of role to play, including, of course, close relationship with government authorities, contracting authorities, research organizations. So for us to reach actually and move ahead towards the SDG realization on gender equality, we all have complementary roles.
Thank you so much for that. We have a question that actually relates to that broader ecosystem, but I'll pose it a bit later. Maybe over to Lindsay now. I think that we've talked about information and data and accessing it, but one of the things that the research found is that there's a lack of gender disaggregated data. Why is this a problem, and what can we do about that?
Well, thank you for the question. I have so many thoughts and reactions to so I might even abuse my time. But basically, unfortunately, around the world, there still is a lot of work to do to structure and improve our procurement data. This has to do with digital transformation, of course. As we move into digital systems, it's an opportunity to not just take paper systems online, but to really rethink these whole processes to make them better for everyone, more fair, more inclusive, more sustainable, more efficient, faster, cheaper, all of the good things that we're trying to achieve together. And kind of an observation that I have about this as well is, we're talking so much of, what can we do? How can we include women-led businesses? And I think it's a symptom, the fact that there's not many women-led businesses participating, or there's so few participating in public procurement, is a symptom that public procurement overall is probably too complex, too Byzantine, that that the system could be fairer, that it could be easier, that it could be having more accountability, more integrity, and so on and so forth. And so, like we've been, hinting at plenty of places in past affirmative action policies to try to reserve a certain amount of contracts for small business or women-led business or people with disabilities, but we really need to make those processes open and fair for them so that they're confident to proceed. And that the data piece comes in because, of course, we're not expecting anybody really, any human being to be looking at a JSON file and deriving, insight and benefit from it. But when we have structured information about procurement, that it's possible to send alerts and communication to women-led business associations to let them know about upcoming opportunities. It's possible to tailor and tag different opportunities for the sectors that we know that there's active women-led businesses in the various districts, to raise alerts to women-led business in those districts, to let them know that these opportunities are coming their way. When partnered with capacity buildings and awareness or outreach, this data can actually be quite useful if it's provided to those women-led businesses in a way that they can use them. And then for the policymaker, having the disaggregated data about the different characteristics of the business that are participating allows them to report on how they're doing in terms of achieving their policy goals and whether or not public procurement is truly becoming more inclusive. So, what is the current value of contracts that's been awarded to persons with disabilities, to women, to small business, and other countries have other priority areas and types of, whether that's Indigenous-led companies, minority-led companies, or veteran-led companies. Different contexts will have different priorities. But the fact that all of those groups are so marginalized from procurement, but also in wider society, it just shows that there's work to be done to kind of lift the whole system up. So I really appreciate the remarks from everyone across the room, just really highlighting that this isn't there's no silver bullet solution here, that a variety of interventions are needed, and that the data is going to both serve the implementation of those interventions, but also help us to monitor and evaluate and learn the effectiveness of those interventions as well.
Thank you for that, and that's a good note to start to think about. Perhaps, we've done all this work and we've made these recommendations and we're highlighting all these opportunities that there are, but the core mandate lies with government at the end of the day about how this is going to work. So Gilbert, I'd really like to hear from you, maybe how are governments responding to the research and based on in terms of their responses, what do you think are the factors contributing to their responses to the research?
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the key things already we learned is that when governments have evidence, they work on it. What do I mean? And thanks to Benson, were given space at the East Africa Procurement Forum, which brings together procurement regulators in the region. And we presented this evidence. And one of the 7 resolutions that they made was a commitment to implement affirmative action in public procurement. So that's one of the key things that has happened. And number 2, 2 of the countries where the research was conducted and following our advocacy have actually amended their policy frameworks. Uganda has amended the Public Procurement Act to include Section 59B that reserves contracts for women. They have gone ahead to develop regulations, let me say draft regulations and guidelines. And more importantly, we like the way they have done it through a consultative process. Women were consulted, the business associations, ourselves. So we think that these guidelines and regulations are good because they have context and ownership of key stakeholders, which is critical for implementation, successful policy implementation. In Rwanda, also following this research and our engagement, they have amended the Procurement Act in November last year, includes Section 6 on inclusiveness, and I think Section 23, where they have said that the people who make decisions on contracts, a third of them must be women. And then Section, I think 32 or 31, where they have said that the minister should come up with a ministerial order to list those contracts where there will be no requirement for insecurity, removing one of the key barriers that is preventing women from accessing government procurement opportunities. We also like it that they have consulted us. The minister last week sent us what he thinks and inviting us to make input in that process. So we like the attitude of government and how they are working with this in terms also of ensuring that the evidence is informing their action. In Tanzania, they have also started the process of amending the law. 3 of the members of parliament, among those that we engaged, raised in parliament to request that the process should be initiated to amend the law, remove the requirement for women to bid in groups, to say that should be their choice. If they want to bid in groups, if they want to go as individual companies, that should be okay. The other one is to require and put sanctions for lack of implementation of this legislation. So we like that also in Tanzania they're moving in that direction. And then the PPRA, the regulator of public procurement in Tanzania, has also initiated a process of developing guidelines. In Ethiopia is where the process is still behind, but we like it that first of all, they're also in the time of amending the Proclamation Act, and they will come with our evidence that they are going to use it and consider reserving contracts for women. I think one of the key things that Benson has mentioned is very critical, that is now in the draft guidelines of Uganda. We hope they will be passed as drafts to define legally what a special interest group is, what a woman-owned business, youth-owned business, and persons with disability-owned business is, because that was one of the key challenges that we see in Kenya and Tanzania, and was also a challenge in Uganda. But saying that 51%, if a company is owned by 51% of any of these groups qualifies to be that group owned, is very critical. So in short, we are happy with progress, at least on the policy level, to remove the barriers that have been preventing women from participating. Now, the big thing is that there's need now also for efforts to address capacity and operational challenges, access to finance, access to information, awareness raising. All of these, I think, are urgent to ensure that the policy objectives are met. And we hope and request that movement on that side of things could start sooner.
Thank you, Gilbert. I think in absentia, help me just appreciate the governments that are responding positively. I hope they get to see this. It's always very encouraging when there's a positive and quick uptake from government when they're partners doing the work. So thank you for sharing that.
So I forgot, 1 second. Kenya also has very positively responded to the research, the evidence. The main issue that was affecting implementation of Anticorruption was delayed payments. And I already talked about the confidence going down from 99,000 companies to 43,000 now. So last month, again following the evidence, and the candidate president at that time, he was deputy but candidate, he attended one of our meetings and got this information. Cabinet passed a resolution and set up a committee to verify people government has not paid in terms of providing services and goods to government. And they have said that as soon as this committee has verified and confirmed this list, they are going to pay. So I think if that is done, it's going to remove a key obstacle and help to rebuild confidence that AGPO is working, that women can participate in public procurement. So I have forgotten about that. It's important in Kenya as well.
It's certainly a big incentive for the business sector to even want to engage in the procurement market. I like also what you said about the different groups. I think sometimes we think about women homogeneously, and I think it's important to say that it needs to benefit all women, not just women living in urban areas, women living in rural areas, women with disability, young women, and just bring everyone along into this opportunity. So now just turning to you, Mr. Benson, I know that Uganda is not officially a member of the OGP. I am officially extending an invitation as a steering committee member for you to join and to take back what you have experienced. So just with regards to your experience at the summit and understanding how the partnership works, the collaborations that happen, the partnerships, things like research partnerships that allow data to support government, capacity trainings, and all the wonderful things that happen within the model of the partnership. How is it that you think that OGP can support governments, or is an enabling space for governments and other partners to be able to advance gender equality through public procurement?
Thank you very much again. I want to, first of all, to acknowledge the invitation to OGP. Since I didn't come representing government, I will take the message back.
Yes.
But in terms of OGP intentions or objectives, they are really good. In terms of inclusivity, citizens' participation, and if we are talking about public procurement, citizens are the beneficiaries. And if they are beneficiaries, their participation and involvement is very critical, especially deciding what their needs are. You are talking for a developing country. Uganda is still a developing country, and we are still wrestling with poverty. How do we get everybody out of poverty? And we think interventions through gender equality would, because we have seen what women can do, especially at family level. And if we start it from family level, then you can go into national level. And some of these were what is talked about. this year. Governments will definitely uptake the initiative to support women or special interest groups because it's their survival as well. They have a very political voice. In Uganda, the majority, 51% of the population is women. So there is no initiative that will come support that group that the government will fight. And for selfish reasons, survival, politically surviving. but in that way, we are benefiting as gender advocates. But let me first narrow it down on operational factors. And I think that's where we should focus. Because government will support these initiatives, will change policies, will change laws. But are women prepared to take up the initiatives? Have we prepared them enough? I am coming next financial year, after this guidance approved, I'm going to call for registration of women. Are they going to respond? If they don't respond, am I going to enforce a procuring act and say you must give this 15% of the contracts to women who don't exist? That is something that we must work on with determined to work on so that we have these firms registered, trained, their capacity built, tell them how to prepare simplified bids so that they can respond. I'm going to ask all entities to publish procurements or contracts that are going to be awarded to this group. Every year they will publish them and report on them. These women have been, these procurements have been awarded to this group. But they will say, we advertised for this special group, there was no response. If there was no response, then there is no recourse. I can't take action. And we are saying where there is no response, then open it up to them. So we must prepare this. And in Uganda, for example, I think the most hindering factor,
I'll just give you one moment.
yeah, is financing. Why can't we create a contract facility? We have Uganda Development Fund. It works on behalf of government. I've seen government putting some funds to support agriculture, for example. And they say this fund is there for agriculture. Why can't we have a fund there? Maybe contributed by you. I say this is condition to support women contracts. So that if I win a contract, I run to this fund, we execute the contract. When they pay, I pay back. It could be simple as that. But they are not going to implement some of this one because of their other external limitations.
Okay, thank you for that. Just on that note, maybe before I come to you, Mukalani, I just maybe want to come back to Lindsay on that last question. I think there's been a lot of conversation about women's barriers in participation in the procurement market, that a lot of women may be at a level of micro business, and are they able to perform procurement contracts? What would you say to that?
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, like this is the big question, and I think there are a few innovative lessons that we can take. And so we said at the beginning we'd bring some international perspectives. So I'm going to bring some perspectives from Colombia right now. So I'm going to bring from another country. But basically, a couple of things. One issue that if you attended our session yesterday on open contracting outcomes was shared by the mayor of Palmyra. They had a similar challenge. They wanted to leverage the public procurement budget to empower women-led businesses, lift women out of poverty. But the challenge was that a lot of the women-led businesses were very informal, very small. And of course, if we're really trying to get at that intersection of poverty and gender, then these are the businesses that we want to target. So some of the creative solutions that they came up with was to take some of the large city contracts that they're awarding every year for school meals and for private security, and to make tweaks on the requirements for those contracts to encourage the big contractors who get those jobs to subcontract with those small women-led businesses. So for example, with the school meals program, I think in the end, it was required that 30% of the food be locally procured from women farmers. And for the private security, that 50% of the staffing of the project be women, who were not even just women who were the leaders of their family or the breadwinner for their family. And so this is a way that procurement can be leveraged to say, okay, you know, maybe these small businesses, it's not realistic that they're going to be taking on the huge administrative operational burden of coming directly to public procurement. But there's a way that public procurement could go to them through some of these innovative solutions. And then what Director Benson was saying about the financing is a very exciting and very important area, because economic vulnerability is one of the reasons why small businesses is hesitant to come to public procurement, because of the risk of delayed payment. So firstly, there's some things that are within government's control to pay more promptly, so to pay faster, or even to structure payments to give maybe a small upfront payment and then follow-on payment. But then also, and this comes back to data a little bit, there's an opportunity to innovate in access to finance. And so Open Contracting Partnership has been working with support of the MasterCard Strive Fund in Colombia to develop a solution to promote access to finance for small business. And so what we're doing is we're taking the data about public procurement. So when a small business is awarded a public contract from the city of Bogota, then that information, the fact that they've won this contract, is shared with the financial institutions. The financial institutions provide the options for what credit facilities that the small business can access, and then the small business receives an alert, receives an email notification, congratulations on winning a contract. Here are some options of access to credit that are available to you, and they can choose what makes sense for them, a loan, a line of credit, a credit card. So this is actually just about to be piloted in the next couple of months. But what Director Benson was saying, you know, if there are financial institutions that have a mandate in a local context to empower more small businesses or to work more with women-led businesses, and we know that there are challenges in the banking sector to kind of connect these parties. This is a question of collaboration, a question of trust, a question of information asymmetry. So there are ways that we can try to work to kind of use data to facilitate those extensions of credits to those businesses so that they would have more financial confidence to participate without, you know, really putting their business at risk by participating.
Thank you. Those are very timely initiatives happening for a very real area of challenge that has been raised by Benson today. So I hope that the findings of the pilot can be shared to support Uganda and other countries, many countries that will be facing similar challenges and how that goes. So we're glad to hear some solutions are coming from Colombia. Over to you, Mukalani. I think one of the things that you said earlier was how women came number 10, I think it was, in those groups. And we're just wondering, are we asking too much for prioritization of women-led businesses and opportunities in public procurement by governments? Or is this something that can be easily done?
Thank you, Steph. I will respond to the question. But before I do, I'd like to offer some thoughts, some reaction to something that Director Benson said earlier. The question was, are the women ready? And when you asked that question, it reminded me, as when we were campaigning a long time ago, Stan and Gilbert traveled throughout the continent, African continent, on trying to promote the adoption of access to information laws by governments. And constantly you hear from officials to say, no, our officials are not ready for an access to information law. Let's prepare them, and then we can pass the access to information law at some point. Think about 30 years later, some countries are still preparing for adoption of access. 30-year long period of preparation. So, you know, we shouldn't allow the perfect to be enemy of the good. I think we should make initial steps, even if they are bold steps. I think they need to be taken. We sometimes use the phrase of you're flying an airplane while you're building it. Because sometimes you just need to take off. You need to begin somewhere. And so the issue of the women prepared, for me, it concerns me, because I've seen how this argument can be used to delay progress. So my take would be, let's start somewhere, let's make a beginning. And the issue around will they respond to calls for bids? And I also think it depends, it's an issue of accessibility. If bids are put on classified sections of newspapers or business sections of newspapers, I don't read those sections myself. And I regard myself as quite sophisticated, I don't. But we need to find ways of meeting them where they are, meeting the people that we're trying to empower and support. Meet them where you are. Find those places that are accessible to them and take the information to them. Of course, if we're doing business as usual, then probably the outcome will be the same. There won't be responses because simply people don't have equal types of access to this information. So just want to offer some of those controversial thoughts. I couldn't help but push back a bit, just slightly. No, I don't think it's a big call, it's a big step. As I said earlier, fear of repeating myself here. If we want to do something about poverty, if we want to alleviate poverty, eradicate poverty, and this is a concern for most of the countries in the developing world, the global south, then that's where you need to begin. As I said, you need to do two things: provide reproductive health care, provide opportunities for economic participation to women, education to girls. That's where you need to begin. So it's not a big call, it's not a big ask. Actually, if you fail to do that, you won't be able to achieve the economic priorities that you've set for yourself. That would be my take.
Thank you so much. And that note on policies and operationalization needs to be responsive to the situation on the ground. That's why they exist, is for the people. Very good note. I love this panel. Very good. It's like popcorn, popping up different thoughts, different ways of doing things. So I think, and I hope that we have given lots of food for thought for those online, for those with us, and we're really looking forward to the questions. So we want to just take a moment to open up. Whether this is a new area for you, whether it's a working area and you're like, oh, wow, great, I'm glad that I came and heard all of this. So I have one online question, but since you all wanted to come through the calls, I'm going to start with the people in the room. And so I'll start with you, sir. Please speak loudly so that we can.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for a very interesting discussion. It's really interesting to listen to. Yes, in Uganda, we are also interested in this study and also looking into how we can help. And I think especially on the data, because that's one of the things you're finding. It's actually quite hard to know what is really the issue. So we're working with an organization that's organizing women-led businesses to also help them get that data better. So they can actually identify which women-led businesses are actually which relevant to go into public procurement. It might not be the one selling charcoal that is bidding on public procurement, but what are the businesses that are actually relevant, and then see if we can help with the incubator program. But what I'm feeling a little bit, and I think maybe I'm addressing a bit the elephant in the room, because I think the big problem, and that goes for women-led business, but for all businesses, is corruption. Corruption and procurement. We can make all the best laws, all the best policies, but if we don't tackle the issues of corruption, we're not getting anywhere. And I think that's because I've met a lot of business in my years working in Uganda. That's women-led, men-led businesses, some of them are small, bigger, that often then they say we don't even bother bidding because of corruption or the deception of corruption. So that is, I think, is the biggest barrier. And I think also your study is not, maybe it's just an assumption that we all know you, but I think that's also what we have to get back to, because that's preventing anybody, businesses from growing. So how do we also ensure that all these good policies we're putting in place, which I think we should still put in place to ensure corruption is there, because at some point, they will definitely force the way for it to happen. But can we do extra? What can we do extra to really tackle this corruption? So these policies are just not going to be some others that are nice to have, are actually being implemented.
Thank you. So I propose to take a round of 3 questions, and then we will go. So go to the gentleman at the back, and then I'll come to Esther, and then we'll take another round. So please.
Thank you very much. My name is Jubiro Shisu. I work with PPDC, the Public Procurement Center, which is based in Nigeria, and we've also been conducting studies and looking at Africa. Our research study, which focused on Lagos and Kaduna states, which are sort of public procurement practices. These states have advanced public procurement practices, reveal similar challenges. But I think I'll pitch more on some of the solutions we've been looking at. So we mapped out over 2,957 businesses, and over 90% of these businesses also have challenges understanding the public procurement criteria, information, processes. And what we did, using that database, was to create an online tool which helps with capacity building and helping them understand the regulations. This is very important because even as we move towards the realm of e-procurement, we need to also understand, the capacity gaps and look at how to fill them. The other parts, which we are also looking at, is the disaggregation beneath the disaggregation, which is looking at beyond just the gender disaggregation, what sectors are these, affirmative actions looking at? And that's also a way of bridging the gap. So for instance, in Lagos State, we're already having conversations with procurement authorities on how to address that. The final part, which I'll just say, is that what we've also experienced is a positive response by the authorities to the data. So what I would say is that beyond the passage of laws, some of the ways we've been able to achieve progress is by bringing the groups into the room, the women-owned businesses into the room with the procurement authorities and with civil society. So a trilateral coalition of sorts have been formed, and that has really ensured that, for instance, the issues which are the director raised about women being present, the women-owned businesses are able to ensure that a woman-owned business is not just a woman at the head of the business and a man behind. So these are some of the lessons I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those. And I want to invite you in the live chat of the live stream, if you can just pop the link to the research so that other people may be able to enjoy and enrich the data that's also here. Over to you, Esther.
Well, first of all, congratulations for this really excellent session. I'm learning a lot. I want to pose a question to anyone who wants to answer in the panel. We heard also here at the OGP Summit how complex the issues that we deal with are, and that we need to embrace this complexity and intersectionality. And if you would like to address this, if you are also looking at how to connect the gender inclusion question with the climate finance and just transition, because there is so much money flowing now, not enough of course, but still a lot on just transition. But participation in general, and specifically of women, it's very low and unsatisfactory. And so, is there anything around that? And how to connect with other parts of this ecosystem? I just recently heard, for instance, about the establishment of something called the New Economic Campaign Hub in South Africa, housed I think now at the African Climate Foundation, that is also looking at new ways of looking at economy from the very grassroots. So how to involve there also these conversations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just to give some guidance to the panel, because our online question also, I'll do it now because it's linked to that. So just a refresher, we have a question on corruption. hasn't come up, big part of public procurement in many countries. How can we make sure that that's not going to hamper all the great findings and recommendations? We had from Nigeria just comments and findings, but I think a good question came up that I would like to direct to Benson here with us. The balance between the need to have the integrity of the procurement process by governments, but how that creates inaccessibility to the process, the complexity of it. So we understand that that complexity exists to secure the integrity, but it also in some cases acts as a barrier for people to be able to access procurement. So what would you be able to say about that? On the climate finance and just transition, just to add to Esther's question, this is from Annette in Kenya. And she said, with the increased effects of climate change, how are governments tackling the nexus between procurement, climate change, gender equality, and unpaid care work? So we will start off with a question of corruption. Who would like to take that, Gilbert? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, corruption was identified as one of the barriers across the 5 countries which the study covered. And the term, use what you have, is a significant factor. That to win a contract, women said that they were being asked to pay in order to get that decision to win a contract, and also to get paid after they have provided the services, they have to pay. Now, there was also a gender dimension in the sense that they use what you have. If it is a young woman, so she has to use her body to influence a decision either for payment or to win the contract. And if it is an elderly woman, the trend was that it is the payment of cash. And again, the research indicates that most of these corruption decisions take place in times and spaces where women are not, in the evenings, in bars, and all that. So the finding on corruption in the research is actually very strong. But the solution that we recommend is shining the light across the entire process of the cycle. For example, we recommend that publication of list of payments and when they supply, for example, in Kenya, how come that it's new suppliers who are paid and those who are in the system for 6-7 years have not been paid? I think by doing that, then there will be conversation on making sure that it's addressed. The law in Kenya says that when a supplier has, the provider has provided their services, they should be paid within 60 days. In Uganda, it says within 30 days. But then you see a significant distance between, the law and the practice. What is surprising is that this issue of late payments is not an issue in Rwanda. In Rwanda, suppliers are paid on time. I think the East African Procurement Forum provides an opportunity to learn how is Rwanda doing it to ensure that, use what you have is not a significant factor in coming payments. Also in Uganda, there was communication by the Ministry of Finance that before a contract is entered, the accounting officer must confirm that they have the funds. So if that is working, it means that, accounting officers have the funds to pay on time. Why they are not doing it is probably not because of money, but because of those other factors like use what you have. The other point, maybe since I'm still here, is that there are low-hanging fruits. Data shows that between 38% and 48%, 48.2% of the registered businesses in the 5 countries are owned by women, which means that the issue of where they will come is not significant. They are likely to come because they set up business to do business. So making sure that they have the information, making sure that they have the confidence that they'll make the money, making sure that they have the capacities to respond, I think will help to transform this 38% in Rwanda or 48% in Kenya, not rush to take advantage of these opportunities.
Any other panelists like to comment on the corruption, or we can move on to the balance of the integrity of procurement versus the integrity? Yeah, so Director Benson, please.
Thank you very much. Let me comment on corruption to begin with. And here we are not talking about women or man, because corruption does not segregate against gender. It's a general, I think I know about gender. And there are programs in all countries that are geared to fighting corruption, including this program, Transparency and Accountability. And the efforts have been taken away in that direction. Corruption is a big thing. And every time, even the international conferences we have attended, the way to fight corruption, generally, there are institutions, in Uganda we have institutions that have been established. There are laws, there are penalties if these laws are breached. People have been, assets have been confiscated. Some people are in prison as we talk. But corruption is still there. It's not eradicated. But in terms of public procurement, even procurement, it is also not very gender segregated. It's also a general issue. But I would take his advice that let's get out to them. If we are going to call for listing, registration of women enterprises, for example, let's get to them. So they register and not complicate the registration requirements. Put a smaller template, which is the business you are in, and put your registration certificate. And actually, we also say registration should be free. In Uganda, when you are registering at times, and here this time we're saying registration should be free, so that as many as possible can register. So when an opportunity now comes, then the opportunity should be focused and saved. And now we are in IT era. It should be easy even on your phone to get an alert and say there is an opportunity in the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Education. And then you can even download this document on your phone. See, and we are saying they should be even simplified documents. But in terms of now, how do you win this data? Again, it goes to how we are fighting the integrity issues in different government entities. We must have, as regulators, deliberate interventions, initiatives to say we want to see women this percentage win contracts. And there are complaints review mechanisms. So we should also bring to the attention of whoever is bidding what are the complaints review mechanisms, so that they can be, if there is the integrity compromises, then they are helped to handle that, especially regulators and anti-corruption agencies. The good thing in Uganda, we have collaboration between the regulator of public procurement and the ombuds, the regulator, the government organ that is fighting corruption. We have full-fledged government organ already inspected of government. So we can fight together so that, and I don't know where that came. Women most times are not willing to like the processes. They are a bit more, the integrity levels are a bit higher.
Let me finish on that positive note for women. If the men have something to say about that, but we'll take it. We love you, men. Maybe just take a last round, but I will come to you, Malin, on the climate question. Just a disclaimer, none of the panelists are climate experts. So both of you, okay. All right, so we'll have both of you on the climate question, but just to take a last round so that we do them all together. So I believe you had a question.
Yeah, it's a suggestion and a question.
Okay.
Just to know more about the side from the Global Partnership for Social Accountability. And we had AFIC as one of our grant partners in the past, working on open contracting and social accountability in Uganda. I'm so happy to see this work. One thing just about how much collaboration there is between Supreme Courts, audit courts, and other similar institutions, for example in Uganda, but beyond Uganda, with civil society and also in OGP countries. I think this was in the literature for a while, but I don't know, it would be great to know more about specific examples that are working or not working, and what are the challenges. And because access to information, I think, was one entry point that we all kind of campaigned for, advocated for, and also the whole infrastructure of legal anti-corruption, clinics that were in the TI movement and all that. I don't know, I'm quite disconnected from that for a while, so I just want to know now that we have that, sometimes we have opened that up, and a better access to information. Legislation is there, so practice might be perfect or not, but definitely there are more challenges than before. Just to see how much are we doing, building our advocacy on that basis. And I think that's open question about access of women, for example, but we could use the same example to all the issues that we are dealing with, and could be different depending on the context. So just to know how much work is done on that front, and how much advocacy is built on that also between donors and civil society to push more for that, because that's actually good. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, please, I have 1 and 2, and then we'll close off. I hope I'm not closing anybody out. Okay, just the last.
Perfect. Hopefully building off that last question, I think one of the benefits of the new OGP strategy is that we have the opportunity and the encouragement to look beyond open government action plans, but to think about open government more broadly, open state initiatives. And I think, certainly the ecosystem that goes around women-owned businesses, around gender-informed procurement, there's a lot of different stakeholders within governments who need to be at the table for that to be successful. So I'm really curious, as we think about information commissioners, as we think about the parliaments, if you could wave a magic wand and design your perfect commitment, what might that look like to start addressing some of these issues more holistically?
Thank you for that question. Yes.
Yeah. Coming from a very holistic view to a very specific question. I was wondering, we talked about the intersection of poverty and employment. Since this is such a loaded question of poverty, so I assume it's a really integrated, coordinated efforts from all departments within civil society. I was just wondering if there's some good examples or some success stories to share. And building on that, we also talked about not to marginalize any groups within women, but sometimes when we focus on specific vulnerable points, it's easy to create that area of discrimination. So we talked about areas, rural areas, and cities, and age. So how do we walk that fine line? And again, if you have some great practice in the field or some examples or solutions.
Thank you so much. Charity, any online questions?
No,
All right, we can finish on that note. So I think I'll start with Lindsay.
Actually, I'll start with you.
Okay, sure.
I was going to turn to you.
But
But I wanted to thank you to the question on that, the climate justice and the climate crisis. because indeed, I believe very few conversations are relevant nowadays without those considerations. But actually, yeah, I wanted to turn to you because our latest phase of funding to the OCP actually has climate sustainability as one of the 3 objectives, and of course, we're weaving in the gender inclusion considerations. And I wanted to invite you to actually tell us more about the work we're doing there.
Wonderful. I will be so happy to speak about that, and then I might sprinkle a hodgepodge of ideas based on wonderful questions. First of all, thank you everybody for engaging so much and asking such great questions. It makes this much more fun. Climate. So one of the things that is, speaking of strategy, that's going to be really important on OCP's next strategy is this integration of people, planet, and prosperity, right? Because we are all aware that environmental degradation, climate protection, mitigation of environmental degradation, as well as adaptation and resilience to climate change. This is such a key and will only be a growing priority over the coming years. At the same time, we're trying to build more inclusive societies. So we really kind of bring these 2 ideas together, and we're not just us, many people bring these ideas together under the umbrella of sustainable public procurement. The idea that we can be more inclusive of historically marginalized groups, as well as to give better services to historically marginalized communities at the same time that we are mitigating our effects on the environment and actually building, through our public procurement investments in infrastructure, more adaptable and resilient society. So I can share a couple of examples. One example would be in Assam, India, where we're working with local partners on a project to improve procurement around flood mitigation. And that has to do with climate resilience and adaptation, right? This community is routinely bombarded with floods. Who are some of the most affected groups by these flooding? A lot of the time it is women, and a lot of the time it is people in more impoverished communities. And what we've done in terms of building out a data model and consulting with local stakeholders is to get a better understanding, and this is with our partner Civic Data Labs in Assam, India, is to get a better understanding of what are the demographic patterns, what are the geographic patterns, what are the weather patterns, what are the procurement patterns, and to build a model to help to make decisions about where to invest and what public procurement to undertake for flood mitigation, in the hopes that it's better suited to actually mitigating against floods, but also these communities that are more marginalized, that have higher proportion of women-led households, that they will benefit more and have more protection so that they don't lose their homes and possibly their livelihoods and possibly their lives in future floods. So already the way that those investments, those procurements are happening are changing. So that's one of our SPP projects. We also have another one looking at how we can buy greener. So what government's buying, I think it's been estimated that government procurement is resulting in 15% of greenhouse gas emissions. So, and then, even just discussions about whether government procurement is procuring single-use plastic, so many procuring more locally versus things that have to travel large distances. So there's so many different elements that go into buying green. And so we're very excited about working with government partners who are looking, because this is really the next frontier. This is really the next frontier stuff. A lot of governments are just starting to wrap their heads around, how to undertake sustainable public procurement, and really trying to kind of do both basically at the same time is quite innovative. There was another just request, for example, kind of where has this been working in terms of helping to lift women out of poverty, and I think the example that was shared by the mayor of Palmyra yesterday was a really good one, and we have a case study about it on our website, so I can share that with you afterwards so that you have something documented that you can take home. And then I'll just comment one last, I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much.
This is the last round, so anything you want to respond?
So the last thing, just on the top of the corruption, absolutely, we do not want to be just encouraging a bunch of vulnerable people to come to a process where they might be asked for bribes or they might be sexually harassed. So definitely we want to think through different strategies that can be used to help mitigate against those by, first of all, putting much greater scrutiny on the procurements related to targeting women-led businesses. So putting more scrutiny on those processes, possibly even, any alert or communication to women-led businesses and saying, hey, you should apply to this public procurement. And by the way, if you are requested for a bribe or if any sexual harassment takes place, call this number where, somebody will be getting in a lot of trouble for that. So having like real consequences, real accountability around those procurements that are aimed at women. Of course, we have to clean up all procurement from corruption. And that's where the move to digital also really helps, because that reduces that interaction that, I'm calling up my friends. I mean, that it still happens, of course, but the more that things can move on to digital, and then the more that picking up our question about audit institution, that our oversight and our audit institution partners are checking and looking at these things and saying, hey, you know what? You've got all these online bids. How come you awarded to that one? And, how can we disqualify these guys? And we'll say one last thing, because when it comes to technology oversight audit, when you have really great procurement data, you can actually start to build red flag systems. So this is a project that we're doing with several partners around the world, including with the Dominican Republic, where we're using the procurement data to build real-time red flag dashboards that can be used by the procurement regulator, that can be used by oversight authorities, that can be used by civil society to monitor what's going on and to start looking into not just individual procurements, but also patterns across procurement to say, hey, how come routinely it's this buyer that we're seeing all these red flags happening? What's going on here? And so that there can start to be this use of the access to information turning into actionable information, turning into accountability. And so that is another way that we can tackle that issue.
Thank you so much for taking on those. Marlene, do you have anything to add, or can I close it?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for your participations and intervention. I think one of the key points that must be emphasized here is that while corruption affects everyone, while delayed payments affects every business, the impact is disproportionate on women businesses because of the factors that the research has found out. And therefore, we must have a gender lens to interventions in this regard. Number two, thank you, sir, for the question. On collaboration with supreme audit institutions, these have a significant role to play in this regard. For example, I've already talked about what the law says on when payments should be done. When you go in Auditor General's reports, you don't find this as a finding, that whereas the law says in Uganda, a payment should be within 30 days or 60 days in Kenya, the audits have not been picking this issue. What we have done following this research, we have engaged the Auditor General of Rwanda. We had a discussion with him. We raised it and he said he was going to pick that up. We have followed it up with formal communication, and he has told us that he's not just going to integrate it in the regular audits, he's actually going to do a performance audit as to whether government contracts are delivering value for citizens, and in this particular case, women. So, and he said that that will be in the next, not for this financial year, but the next financial year audit. So if that is implemented, I think that will be a good progress. He also invited us to, from time to time, be sharing with him areas that will need his attention. And this is an example that we're going to take to other countries as well. Alison, on what recommendations would look like in this space. Open government is about transparency, and yet the research finds that number one, the level of disclosure, the level of access to information on procurement opportunities is very low. But quite significant also, the formats within which through the formats in which this data is published is such that it cannot be properly used for accountability, for decision making. So my call to OGP, all OGP countries, is that they should make a commitment to improve disclosure of procurement information based on a global standard such as the open contracting data standard. That way, we will be able then to analyze and provide all this good feedback. For example,
We have 3 minutes.
Oh, sorry.
I request no example, but
Okay.
call the
Okay, so that is one goal. Improve, strengthen and improve disclosure. Open government also is about inclusiveness. Evidence has pointed out that women are not participating. So OGP countries need to be more intentional in making sure that women participate. And one of the key things they must do or should do is reserve contracts. Even when there are capacity challenges or fears around that, when you reserve, you have set a target. Everyone knows that this is a target that I should go towards. I may not be achieving it now, but in 2-3 years, there should be demonstrative progress towards that regard. And OGP is also about delivering services to have impact in real lives. So we will need commitments around this issue, procurements, improving lives. So I think commitments, those 3 commitments, I think will be important. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those concise examples. The trouble with winding up last is that everybody's time has eaten up your time. So you have 1 minute each, please, for some closing remarks. You can have the 2.
I want to make a comment on Esther's concern. What we have done in Uganda is have inclusion in our procurement law for sustainable procurement. But also going further to revise our standard bidding documents, which is within my docket, include requirements for environment and social, so that they are responded to and they are implemented and we enforce compliance. Lastly, I want to appreciate this panel and good moderation. And I believe if we continue with these initiatives, the world is
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite the panelists to appreciate our I think it's really enriched the process. And now if you would help me to appreciate the panelists. The support that you offer that really contributes to this field and body of work, and for the work that you're doing to promote sustainable gender equality initiatives within procurement. So thank you so much. I hope that you do enjoy the rest of the day. You have time to enjoy beautiful talent. We can request, please, if the panelists can just stand for a group photo with the organizers. I think that would be a good day. Good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.